Well, good evening, everyone, and welcome to Environmental Coffee House. It's good to see you guys. I wanted to have Nicholas come on tonight with me, but he was not able to for, family reasons and all that. So I'm going solo here tonight. And it's great to see everybody. Hi, Kim. Hello, astrologer, climate witness, and Melanie. And going south. Hello, and lightning rod, Karen, Scott. Welcome, everybody. Welcome, everybody. So tonight, we're going to talk about this wet bulb stuff. Like, what is this wet bulb stuff anyway? And that's how it started today. Actually, I was talking to someone and we were chit-chatting, and she told me that, she did not know what wet bulb temperatures were. And she's younger. And I thought, wow, I wasn't even sure. I wasn't motivated for today. Like Kim, I've been having some wicked back problems and I wasn't motivated at all, but I'm here and it's great. And hello, Trulia, and hello, Early Love. So let's get started with this. And I'm going to pull up my own little presentation first. All right, here we go. All right. So, I've got a couple of things that we're going to do that we're going to make, have a little fun at first. And of course, it is the 4th of July in the United States. And so we don't want to forget where the United States, where the real heritage is in the United States. And so I thought I would share this picture with you. Definitely with you, so we could, pay tribute. Okay. So the next one, a little bit of this is a breaking news. Attention, all Arizonans. We have a cactus trying to escape the heat. He is armed and dangerous. Do not, I repeat, do not try to apprehend the subject. Mother Nature will do her best to bring this rogue cactus in. Thank you and good night. Okay, no, we're not really leaving. But, okay. So the next one for 4th of July. So we had a little chuckle, ha, ha, ha. This one is interesting. You've probably seen it was all over Twitter, but I found somebody did a little edit to it, and I thought, hey, this is pretty cool. So we're going to get started and warmed up with this one. I don't think it'll be too loud. Let me make sure my system audio is on. All right, let's go. Happy 4th of July.
You cannot stick it in the ground. It's not going to work. Who did that? You got to put it in the shoe.
All right, well, that's the 4th of July for you. I thought that person was really creative to do that. All right, now we're going to move on. I found another person to turn you on to, and I'll put these links in the show notes. This is somebody after my own heart, kind of a weird channel I just found, but he did describe what the wet bulb temperatures are, and I thought, okay, let's go for it.
Providence, right now your wet bulb temp is 73 degrees. What is a wet bulb temp? Well, let's give you some obvious info first. Your body gets hot, your body pours out liquid, sweat, all over your body. That sweat evaporates off of your skin, cooling it down. But what if there was a dampness and temperature combo that could kill you? What if it were so dank and so hot, where the air was so saturated with water, that your sweat could not evaporate from your body? Uh-oh, that's too hot. What if you took a thermometer and put a wet cloth over it? That's how you get a wet bulb temperature. As water evaporates off the cloth, the wet bulb temperature cools down, like sweat on your body. When the air is drier, wet bulb temperature is lower than the normal temperature. With 100% relative humidity, the normal temp equals the wet bulb temperature. Well, what wet bulb temperature is too much for a human being to survive in? A wet bulb temp of 95 degrees will kill you within hours, as your body loses its ability to cool down. At 120 degrees at 10% humidity, the wet bulb temp is 75. But at 95 degrees at 100% humidity, the wet bulb temp is 95. At 100 degrees at 82% humidity, the wet bulb temp is 95. And at 120 degrees and just 37% humidity, the wet bulb temp is also 95. And uh-oh, wet bulb temps are increasing across your planet. Parts of your South Empire had wet bulb temps at 90 or above recently, as you slip deeper and deeper into your death spiral. Part of repentance to your lords is staying safe and not dying, so that you can live to repent another day.
Alright, that was a good find. You have to admit. And I will put the show notes in. He's a very small channel and he's creative though. He's creative. So as we move on, this is kind of disturbing and I'm not sure if it's big enough for you to read, but stop. Extreme heat danger. Walking after 10 a.m. is not recommended. These are signs that might be more prevalent as we move on, as we move on to killer wet bulb temperatures. And it's quite the conundrum because a lot of people are talking about it. And of course, as people are talking about it, there are the other people that are talking about it and saying, well, dude, it's like, always been 115 or 118 in Phoenix and people, they're not dying. Well, there's a lot of a difference between the regular Phoenix temperatures and wet bulb, okay? And we're going to get into it. So the next one is a little explanation I found from Grist, and this is a little bit different. And yes, Torstein, everybody hates facts, but enjoy this one. It's pretty good. And Lindsay, I'm really glad you're here, sweetheart, because I'm shouting out to you. Mwah. All right, Lindsay.
There's a temperature threshold beyond which the human body simply can't survive. A threshold that some parts of the world are increasingly starting to cross. It's a wet bulb temperature of 95 degrees Fahrenheit. Let's unpack what that means, starting with the number, 95. It has to do with our human body temperature. The human body needs to be right around 98.6 degrees Fahrenheit. If our body temperature gets too high or too low, bad things can happen. Our bodies are always giving off heat from normal functions like digesting, thinking, and pumping blood. If it were to get above 95 degrees Fahrenheit outside, our body heat just wouldn't have anywhere to go. That's why our bodies have a built-in cooling system. Sweat. Sweat works by using a physics hack called evaporative cooling. It takes quite a bit of heat to turn water from a liquid to a gas. So as little droplets of sweat leave our skin, they pull a lot of heat away from our bodies. When the air is really dry, a little bit of sweat can cool us down a lot. But humid air, on the other hand, already contains a lot of water vapor, which makes it harder for sweat to evaporate, and we can't cool down as well. This is where the term wet bulb temperature comes in. It's a measure of heat and humidity, essentially the temperature we experience after sweat cools us off. We can measure the wet bulb temperature by sticking a damp little sleeve on the end of a thermometer and spinning it around. Water evaporates from the sock, cooling down the thermometer. If it's humid, it hardly cools down at all. And if the air is dry, it cools down a lot. That final reading after it's cooled down is the wet bulb temperature. In Death Valley, one of the hottest places on Earth, temperatures often get up to 120 degrees Fahrenheit. But the air is so dry that it actually only registers a wet bulb temperature of 77 degrees. At the same time, a humid state like Florida could reach that same wet bulb temperature on a muggy 86-degree day. And when the wet bulb temperature gets above 95 degrees Fahrenheit, the body loses its ability to cool down, and the consequences can be deadly. Until recently, scientists didn't think we'd crossed this threshold outside of doomsday climate change scenarios. But a 2020 study looking at detailed weather records around the world found we've already crossed it at least 14 times in the last 40 years. These hot, humid events have all been clustered in two regions, Pakistan and the Arabian Peninsula. The warm water in the Red Sea and the Persian Gulf makes the air above extremely humid. Inland on the Arabian Peninsula, the arid continental heat causes temperatures to skyrocket. And when these two systems meet, they can tip the wet bulb temperatures above that 95-degree threshold. In Pakistan, it's a little less clear what's driving these hot, humid extremes. But scientists think it's caused by warm, humid air flowing inland during the monsoon season. As the air passes over the Indus River, it only gets more humid, until it hits cities like Jacobabad, often referred to as one of the hottest cities on Earth. Jacobabad has crossed that deadly wet bulb threshold a whopping 6 times, the most of any single city on record. If we plot all these events over time, it's clear these hot, humid extremes are increasing as the planet warms. Scientists expect these events to occur even more frequently in these regions going forward. And other places like coastal Mexico and a larger portion of South Asia might soon be at risk of crossing these thresholds for the first time. Extreme heat is deadly at temperatures well below the 95-degree threshold. Healthy young adults can experience serious health effects at a wet bulb temperature of 86 degrees. And even dry heat can be dangerous when people's bodies simply can't pump out sweat fast enough to cool themselves. With every degree of warming, we're making these dangerous heat events even more likely. And stopping climate change may be our best chance to keep these events as rare as possible.
Okay, so I think that gave us a good primer for what we are going to start with. And I'm going to give you an overview of pretty much what has been going on. And this article, what happened to it? Oh my goodness. Let me see if I lost it. Hang on, I'll get it back. And it was supposed to be in English. Oh, I'm going to be very upset if I screwed this article up. Hang on. Oh, I'm so unhappy. I had it all set up. It was a good article too. Let me see if I can find it. This might be it. And it is not letting me go into English. And I think I'm going to have to forgo this article unless I could get it into English. And I'm really sorry, guys, because it was good. But this browser seems to be a little different than the other browser that I have. And I like this browser because no ads come up. So, oh, well, best laid plans. So let's go into the first in nature. Okay, we'll just forget about that one. We'll go into nature. And in 1962, relative importance of dry and wet bulb temperatures in causing heat stress in cattle. So the farmers were already seeing this phenomena in 1962. And then there were many articles, and there was and especially in those hideous, horrible feedlots, which we're going to talk about later, revealing the diversity of internal body temperature and panting response for feedlot cattle under environmental thermal stress. So Nature has a lot of articles about the cattle and how it affects them, besides just people. It's not always just people. So this is called State of the Planet. We didn't steal it from them, but that's what our show is called when we get together and we all do it. And this was also from 2020. Potentially fatal combinations of humidity and heat are emerging across the globe. And while I really wanted to read the other one, I'm not going to read this whole thing, but most everyone knows that humid heat is harder to handle than the dry kind. And recently, some scientists have projected that later in the century, it's always later in the century, in parts of the tropics and the subtropics, and as we're learning in Pakistan, warming climate could cause combined heat and humidity to reach levels rarely, if ever, experienced now by humans. Now, this is 2020, right? And they're talking about the new study that came out, which everybody was talking about in 2020. I watched a million videos today, even though I was, doing a lot of other things. And here, see, talking about Bangladesh, which is one of the most vulnerable places. And humidity worsens the effect of heat because humans cool their bodies by sweating, which we've already learned. Water expelled through the skin removes excess body heat, and when it evaporates, it carries that heat away. The process works nicely in the deserts where there's like no humidity, not a lot of humidity, but it works a lot less well in humid regions where the air is already too laden with moisture to take on much more. So evaporation of the sweat slows, and in the most extreme instances, it can stop. And that's why they call it the wet bulb centigrade scale. In the United States, they call it the heat index or the real feel Fahrenheit readings. And tell me, guys, don't you think that we really ought to just go to the metric system and get rid of, Fahrenheit and all be one with the world? Jennifer and I are constantly miserable over that. But so this article just goes on, and it's from 2020, and it talks about pretty much, air conditioning blunting the effects, but not everybody has air conditioning. So I want to move on because, yes, it was a good article, but I'm not going to read the whole thing. That's not what I want to do tonight. Science advances, and this was also from 2020. And the emergence of heat and humidity is too severe for human tolerance. So if it's too severe for human tolerance, well, let's think of all the critters. And that's what I think of all the time. Humans' ability to shed heat has enabled us, this is the abstract from this one, to range over every continent. But a wet bulb temperature of 35 C, it really marks our upper physiological limits, and much lower values have serious health and productivity impacts. Climate models project for the first time, the first 35 C occurrences by the mid 21st century, which is not far. We're already in, the first quarter? Okay, it's coming. It's here. It's here. So this article was talking all about humans and the way we walk. We're bipedal, our naked skin, our sweat glands, and our body's sophisticated cooling system. And again, they did a study, and I think it was that using models, it was qualitative. Our survey of climate record from station data reveals many global TW exceedances, total of 31 and 33. So they're taking a look, and all this will be in the notes. Color symbols represent the 99th percentile of observed daily maximum for 1979 to 2017, So this was a study. You'll look at this study. I'm just showing you what's out there. And Sam Carana on Twitter was talking about this and has a whole thing on the Arctic blog spot, which we will go to next time. But I wanted to go into the engineering toolbox. The engineers, okay, they have the technical dry bulb, wet bulb, and dew point temperatures. And the dry bulb, the wet bulb, and the dew point temperatures are important to determine the state of humid air. The knowledge of only two of these values is enough to determine the state of moist air, including the content of water vapor and the sensible and latent energy, which is called enthalpy. Enthalpy. Repeat after me. Enthalpy. Okay, so they go into the dry bulb temperature. And these are little wet bulbs here. And the dry bulb, and this is very technical. So we're just doing an overview. The dry bulb temperature usually referred to as air temperature, is the air property that is most commonly used. When people refer to the temperature of the air, they are normally referring to the dry bulb temperature. Dry bulb temperature refers basically to the ambient air temperature. It's called dry bulb because the air temperature is indicated by a thermometer not affected by the moisture in the air. So dry bulb temperature, and here is the TDB, how they measure it. It's the unit of measure. Can be measured using a normal thermometer freely exposed to the air but shielded from radiation and moisture. The temperature is usually given in Celsius or degrees. And then they use Kelvin is a unit also. Okay, so maybe it's a little above us because we don't have a scientist meteorologist with us, but, they're doing a pretty good job for, an engineer. The engineering toolbox is by engineers for engineers. And then the wet bulb temperature. And the wet bulb is the adiabatic saturation temperature. Wet bulb temperature can be measured using a thermometer with the bulb wrapped in muslin, cotton sometimes. I've read different things about it. The adiabatic, I'm having a bad time tonight. Adiabatic evaporation of water from the thermometer bulb, and the cooling effect is indicated by a wet bulb temperature lower than the dry bulb temperature in the air. The rate of evaporation from the wet bandage on that bulb and the temperature difference between the dry bulb and the wet bulb depends on the humidity of the air. So the evaporation from the wet muslin is reduced when air contains more water vapor. The wet bulb temperature is always between the dry bulb temperature and the dew point. So for the wet bulb, there is a dynamic equilibrium between heat gained because the wet bulb is cooler than the surrounding air and heat loss because of evaporation. The wet bulb temperature is the temperature of an object that can be achieved through evaporative cooling, assuming good airflow and that the ambient air temperatures remain the same. So by combining the dry bulb and the wet bulb temperature in a psychrometric chart or the Molly diagram, the state of the human air can be determined. Lines of constant wet bulb temperatures run diagonally from the upper left to the lower right in the chart. And let's just see. This is what the chart looks like. This is what they use. These scientists, a lot of people use this chart. So a dew point. Okay, here's the dew point now. The dew point is the temperature where the water vapor starts to condense out of the air, the temperature at which air becomes completely saturated. Above this temperature, the moisture stays in the air. If the dew point temperature is close to the dry air temperature, the relative humidity is high. If the dew point is well below the dry air temperature, the relative humidity is low. If moisture condenses on a cold bottle taken from the refrigerator, the dew point temperature of the air is above the temperature in the refrigerator. Are you with me, guys? So the dew point temperature is always lower than the dry bulb temperature, and it will be identical with 100% relative humidity. The air is at the saturation line. So as air temperature changes, the dew point tends to remain constant unless water is added or removed. So these can be measured by filling a metal can with water and some ice cubes. Stir by a thermometer and watch the outside of the can. When the vapor in the air starts to condensate on the outside of the can, the temperature on the thermometer is pretty close to the dew point of the actual air. So there's a lot more to this. And of course, again, if you are so interested, it will be in the show notes. So we're going to move from the Toolbox. And then there is an interactive from Columbia. There's an interactive daily maximum wet bulb temperature map updates. So you can see all these different wet bulbs all over the country, all over the world. And this is the fun one. This is the Wetbulb Calculator. And what I thought was we would put in some numbers. And I don't know if any of you want to spit out any numbers, but we could see what a wet bulb temperature is. Obsolete optics. Let me put this up so I can put your question up on the, where does one go to find the show notes? You find the show notes after the show. I put all of the references in underneath the, where all the other wording, all the other languages. So I just wanted, so if anybody is confused about show notes, that's how you find them. Okay. All right. So here, does anybody want to throw out any temperatures? We'll do Fahrenheit for now, since we're probably mostly United States, but we can do Celsius too, because this is called the Omni Calculator, and it's pretty cool. The wet bulb calculator is designed to help you estimate the wet bulb temperature based on only two pieces of data: the temperature and the relative humidity. So, okay, let's say it's hot here at my house, and it is 90 degrees. All right, let's get in there. Let's get in the 90 degrees. Okay, so it's hot. Oh my goodness. And the humidity, because it's really crappy out, is 88. And it's been that way lately. Just hasn't been 90, but it was 88. So here we get an answer. If this theoretical, hypothetical wet bulb above 30 C or 86 F pose potential fatal danger to humans outside, it's also very uncomfortable. In these conditions, you should avoid direct sunlight and drink lots of water. All right, so dude, you want to do 105 and 80%. Okay, so let's do 105, and then we're doing this in 80%, and we have a dew point of a wet bulb temperature of 99.07. Theoretically, humans cannot survive for very long when the wet bulb temperature exceeds these numbers. So if that's what you're experiencing, better get your ass to the air conditioning or drink lots of water. But people all over the world that have these kind of temperatures, they don't have access to air conditioning. And that's when the deaths happen. But this is pretty cool, little nifty website. It has a wet bulb calculator, and it does tell you all about that, how they do it. Now, there's something called the wet bulb global temperature I also wanted to tell you about. which is wet bulb global temperature, is a kind of apparent temperature, the temperature perceived by humans, used to estimate the effect of temperature, humidity, wind speed, and sunlight on humans. Athletes, industrial hygienists, and the military, they use it to prevent heat stroke by following guidelines for physical activity and water intake. So the wet bulb globe temperature is determined by the following equation, which I would just be plugging it in, right? And I'm sure that there's a plug in here. I'm sure there is, because let's see, they've got, look at this, lightning distance calculator, the psychrometric calculator, relative humidity, air pressure at altitude, cloud base. This is really pretty cool. So you guys need to go play with this Omni calculator. So that the globe thermometer is measured by a thermometer situated in a black globe. It allows for an estimation of direct solar radiation. Measured indoors without direct solar radiation sunlight, the wet bulb globe temperature uses a shortened formula. All right, so there we go. Anybody have any other numbers? How about this was what it was like at my house last week. Okay, let's say it was 62, okay? But we had a 99. Look at that. The wet bulb temperature was within safe ranges, because even though the humidity was disgusting and sucked, we weren't getting a wet bulb temperature. Nothing was hurting us. So, all right, we're going to move on. We're moving on from the calculator. We're going to move on to the critters. All right. And this is from Applied Ecology News. And in the critters, everybody talks about humans, and we forget about these little guys. And by Obsolete Optics, thank you for coming. Obsolete Optics, by the way, runs the Discord. If anybody's interested, just send me an email and I'll send you the link to the Discord. So this was from 2021, and it's an interview. And again, for the interest of time, I'm not going to do a super long show. This interview was really very interesting. This was Ethan Koffel. He's an assistant professor of geography at Syracuse University, which is actually not that far from me. He researches how climate change will affect people and how our adaptation choices will affect our vulnerability to climate extremes in a warmer world. Steve Sherwood is a professor of meteorology and climate dynamics at the University of New South Wales in Sydney, Australia. And Abigail DeBroja is an assistant professor of biology and more specifically paleoecology, which sounds fascinating, really fascinating, at the Southern Arkansas University. So the three of them sat down to talk about future warming, ancient warming, and its consequences. And the interview starts with questions for them about Ethan and Steve about the future, and then loops Abigail to help us consider how the past helps us think about the future. And again, I'm not going through everything tonight. I'm just giving you these tools. You can totally then look at these yourself, because I could go on, and if I read everything, we'd be here for 2 hours. So that's my job with Jennifer. So in the interview, wet bulb temperature comes up again and again. Wet bulb temperature is a measure of temperature that combines the temperature and humidity. We've already gone over this how many times. So I'm just going to do the beginning one. And can you walk me through what happens to the human body at wet bulb temperatures, let's say at 30, 32, and 35? All right. Well, it's a sliding scale where our ability to lose heat through evaporative cooling declines. As wet bulb temps rise, heat more easily accumulates in the body. Core temperature rises and you experience heat illness. So a wet bulb of 30C would exceed guidelines for physical activity, making it dangerous. 32C would obviously be worse and probably dangerous even without physical activity, especially for someone not adapted to heat. Okay. So if your temperature continues rising, your organs eventually fail. There is possibly a threshold of 35°C, which is 95 Fahrenheit, that is about the temperature of our skin. And if wet bulb temperatures exceed 35°C, we won't be able to shed heat through evaporative cooling. This means we have no way to cool ourselves. We would need to get to a cooler place. And like I said, there are places in the world that can't do that. People, animals, they can't do that. They can't do it. So what do you think the most immediate consequences of rising wet bulb temperatures are likely for human societies? Well, they are already driving behavioral changes, decreased work productivity, especially in hot climates, and increasing the frequency of incidents where it is too hot for physical activities, such as summertime sports tournaments. This will continue and become more obvious as we are now emerging from the envelope of natural variability and beginning to experience unprecedented conditions in many areas on a more frequent basis. So how many areas have already seen wet bulb temperatures above 35 and 95? Well, a paper, and this was 2021, a paper earlier this year reported a few measurements hitting 35°C in a couple of coastal cities in the Persian Gulf region. It's not certain that these observations were accurate, but it does appear that 35°C values sometimes occur over the Gulf itself because the ocean has become so warm that all it takes for this air, that's all it takes for the air to reach the city. The events when it does so are are very rare and brief. In most places, the wet bulb temperature never exceeds 30°C in today's climate. All right, that's we're talking today's. So by 2050, it'll be rare by 2050, but it also depends on our emissions. And one of my findings is that large-scale exposure to wet bulbs above 35 could be greatly reduced, if not prevented, by keeping global temperatures in 2°C. Oh my God. So already these folks from Applied Ecology News from North Carolina State University, Syracuse, and New South Wales, they're already saying we're not going to stay at 1°C. That was what the target was for the IPCC, right? 1°C. All right. So here, 2 degrees of warming is in line with the climate scenario RCP 2-6, in which we radically reduce emissions. This scenario assumes emissions begin to decline by 2020. Okay, so this was 2020 that year. It also requires that emissions are zero by 2100, correct? Yes. All right. I'm not even going on because it's not happening. It's not happening. Are we seeing anything happening that's really letting emissions go? No. And I don't know if they were having this discussion before the testing on the aerosol masking effect happened when planes stopped flying. So there's a lot. So we're going to move on. Okay. And we're going to move on to the silent killer. And it's a series on surviving the extremely hot future. And this is what happens if the world gets too hot for animals to survive. And, this was they talked about the cattle, right, that died from heat stress. And everybody heard the story, and there was a whole lot of conspiracy bullshit that it was Bill Gates who killed the cattle, that the water was poisoned, blah, 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 blah. And I'm here to tell you that veterinarians really worked hard to squash that bullshit and tell everybody that that those videos, they may have happened, but there was a reason for it. And yes, it does happen that it gets really hot in Kansas. But what happened was something that was, the it's not unheard of. And this veterinarian, he works with feedlots, which I don't know how he can do it. I don't know. I guess he loves the animals, and it's very difficult. But what happened, a specific set of factors coming together makes it difficult to avoid this kind of devastation. And you can think of it like you would a blizzard or a hurricane, just with heat instead of a storm. And that's what it was. It was like a heat storm. What happened to the thousands of cattle found dead is referred to as a heat stress event. The heat radiates down and is having an impact. Sometimes the conditions get so extreme it doesn't matter how hard producers prepare the environment, the operation, or the animals. You have to understand that it was a heat stress event is what caused those cattle deaths. And that was the video. We all saw that video. We all saw it. And we all probably, if you're on Twitter or if you listen to all the fucking clueless morons talking about, all of the things and the reasons instead of understanding the science behind it. Well, here's the science behind it. Dr. Lindbergh wants people to understand that it was the heat stress. It was a perfect storm. They had a rain event, actually several days of rain, which created some high humidity in a very typically arid environment. And that was followed by a sharp spike in temperatures to 100 plus degrees with excessive humidity and no wind. It created conditions that overwhelmed. Dr. Lindbergh said overnight temperatures did not dip low enough to help. So nighttime lows that didn't get very low. And that's when the cattle and animals are able to dissipate the thermal load from the previous. And when they can't dissipate that thermal heat load, it continues to build. Yeah. So he said cattle are resilient animals, but abruptly going from cool temperatures to extreme heat, well, there was no time for them to acclimate. These natural disasters are not very common. Over the 20 plus years, I can rarely only think of 2 other natural disaster situations that have affected animals. When it comes to these kind of events, he said the impact on people involved in these operations is devastating. It's an emotional effect. We also have to make sure we take care of our people when it comes to those things, and it can affect us as veterinarians. Very hard job to be a veterinarian in those horrible, hideous feedlots. Horrible. All right, so this article from 2022 talks about just that. What if it gets too hot? And this was that video, but I'm not going to show it. That was the video where all kinds of, bullshit on Twitter, and it went crazy. All right. So they published in 2010, they published a paper introducing Wetbulb Temperature. All right. But they say that most heat stress, it's an equal opportunity killer. Look to the past. I began to work. When they worked on it, they were inspired by records of past greenhouse climates over the past 90 million years, in which temperatures and humidity were mostly much higher than they are today. And at a conference in which I was presenting these paleoclimate records, Sherwood asked, given that there is substantial evidence that the world used to be much hotter, is there a thermal limit that applies to all warm-blooded animals which might have been crossed in the past? If so, could it be crossed in the future, causing mass extinctions? And we're seeing some of that now. We really are. So they go on to talk about birds and mammals and the internal temperatures of these animals. And it's not something that human beings or other animals can rapidly evolve out of. So there, and then of course they're talking about some good news. In climate model simulations, it requires substantial warming, more than 6 degrees Celsius, to create zones deadly to endothermic mammals and birds over substantial areas. That's not likely to happen even by the year 2300. Okay, we don't know that. When was this written? These guys say it's not likely to happen. This was just written like a year ago. So I would like you to read this. It will again be in those copious show notes. And what are they talking about? To intervene or not to intervene? Stop the food lots. If you're going to eat meat, just buy local. Everybody. It's going to have to change. Of course, everything's going to have to change. But this is not what the show is about. To intervene with 1 degree Celsius of global warming already locked in and several more that appear to be guaranteed by current policies over the next century, scientists will see just how much adaptability and genetic phenotypic plasticity there is. This raises the question of the degree to which humans can and should interfere to help this process along via more selective breeding or genetic modification. So they're going to genetically modify farm animals to resist the heat and the wet bulb temperatures. Does man ever stop? Do humans ever stop? Wouldn't it be much easier? So this was their Silent Killer, a series on surviving the extremely hot future. Are cities ready for extreme heat? The cold crunch. How to cool people without overheating the planet. What happens if the world gets too hot for animals to survive? How to not die of heat on a too hot planet, and helping pollen beat the heat to save global agriculture. So it really looks, this is from the Bulletin of Atomic Scientists, and it's a very worthwhile article and series. So I would say check it out. Okay, check it out. All right. So even the Christian Science Monitor is getting into this. Global heat waves are getting hotter. How can risks be curbed? Climate change fueled heat waves are shattering records worldwide, and scientists expect them to worsen. Urgent action is needed, they say, to mitigate risks to health, food security, water management, and the environment. This was June 1st, 2023. And so they were talking about the heat waves that are breaking records around the world, from India, Thailand, to the normally mild U.S. Pacific Northwest, with scientists predicting that the global average temperatures will likely surge to record levels in the next 5 years. And we've already seen records broken this week. So it's happening. In particular, the combination of a new El Nino weather pattern starting this June and the continued release of climate-changing emissions will push the global temperatures into uncharted territories. You know, I kind of want to, I don't know. I kind of want to give that a flush, but I got to find it. Did you hear it? Yeah, we had to give that a flush, definitely. So is climate change the main driver of new heat records? Yes. Climate change is fueling a range of extreme weather around the world, from flooding to storms to droughts. But the change is most clearly producing a more extreme heat. I like that the Christian Science Monitor is not saying that it's God's will, but they're not evangelical. So, and Lindsay, I'm really glad you're here, by the way. I just looked over and saw that you're invested in this chat, which is really cool. So they go on and they talk about that, and they also are talking about the ocean surface temperatures are now at their highest level, which I think for me, a few weeks ago when all this started with the ocean temperatures, really catapulted me into that blues, that really sad, that sad few weeks I went through. Just put my mind. And of course, I have all of you, and I have support. It was just really tough because it really, it brought it home, especially the show with Jim. Really brought it home. So they fear seas may be reaching the limits of their heat-absorbing abilities, which could mean more heat stuck in the atmosphere and soaring thermometers and burning up and dying animals. Yes, sea animals. So why are they dangerous? Many people, they really look forward to the hot summer temperatures, and photographs on sweltering days often show people at the beach or splashing on fountains. But heat can be deadly, and many people are unprepared for the level of heat waves that are now appearing and that are predicted in the future, scientists say. Extreme heat stress has already doubled in the last 40 years, according to NASA, especially in humid places when heat and humidity combine to produce that wet bulb we've been talking about the whole entire show. Above 35, the human body can no longer effectively get rid of enough heat. So, in such extreme heat wave conditions, which are becoming much more frequent around the world, those exposed can die without swift access to air conditioning and fans, which fans are not always it at all, or other cooling. Residents of already hot countries from India to Iran are at particular risk, but so are people in the normally cooler places, such as the U.S. Pacific Northwest, who may not understand the risks or have access to cooling technology. And I will say that is true because in Eugene, Oregon, where my brother lives, they have some oppressive days that are in the 90s. He never had air conditioning. It never used to be like that, of course. And so we have a little family chat, and it's he'll let us know how hot it is or how miserable he was in Eugene, because he doesn't have air conditioning. Nobody does. Now they have to get window air conditioners. So in 2021, a powerful heat wave killed at least 112 people in Washington state, where you are, Kim, with 1,400 dying across the broader region, including Canada. In Europe, a series of heat waves between June and August 2022 caused over 20,000 heat-related deaths, particularly in countries such as Spain and France, health agencies estimate. So how can risks from worsening heat waves be reduced? Building awareness that heat waves are becoming increasingly deadly is a first key step, doctors and scientists say. So if you're a Christian and you're going to church, let's hope that this is being discussed. I have no clue. Heat researchers have proposed giving heat waves names, and now, as like hurricanes and storms, to emphasize the level of threat they present to people. Ensuring that those in the path of heat waves have access to reliable cooling is also crucial. A problem when increased demand for cooling during heat waves can spark power outages. Think Texas. Texas, the state where the idiot governor has now taken away water breaks from construction workers. Can you get any more disgusting than that? Because growing use of air conditioning can drive more climate change and produce even hotter temperatures, finding low-carbon means of cooling, such as using wind and solar to generate electricity, is crucial, as scientists say. So shifting work and school hours to cooler parts of the day and providing more breaks for workers can also save lives, scientists say. And as can finding simple, low-cost ways to make homes and workplaces cooler, such as painting roofs white. So what happens if it's not curbed? Well, if the oil and gas and coal emissions continue and heat waves worsen, especially hot parts of the planet could become uninhabitable, sparking mass migration and potentially large-scale deaths if people are unable to find respite from the heat. Extreme heat could also spur those other types of disasters, from water shortages and more water evaporates in hot conditions, to worsening droughts, wildfires, and losses of nature. And I'll tell you, these fires, I don't know, it's crazy. Heat waves could also hurt economies, as workers, especially those toiling outdoors, especially in Texas, such as farmers, find it increasingly difficult to do their jobs, or as heat-blighted crops fail, adding to the planet's already growing numbers of hungry people. Wow. So that was really good. I thought it was really good. And they actually do have some really good articles at the Christian Science Monitor. Now I'm going to go over to the Arctic News. Now, this was from last Sunday, but the Arctic News blog was talking about the extreme heat that was coming in the south. And again, it's most of the same stuff that we talked about in earlier articles. So, you can find this on the web or in Facebook at Sam Carana's page. And this particularly was the forecast for June 29th, with weather conditions prolonged by circular wind patterns. That's the jet stream. While the jet stream is crossing the equator from the bottom left, the temperatures as high as 39.9 C combined with a relative humidity of 35% result in perceived temperatures as high as 45 C at the green circle. So again, you can see all of this I will be putting in the show notes after the show. All right, so perceived feels like air temperatures as high as 53.1 or 127.7 were recorded in Pakistan on July 4th, 2023. Today, with a 46.7 C or 116.1 temperature and a 24% oh, he must have updated this, from last week. So also the jet stream deformation shows up at the 250 HPA with circular wind patterns and wind crossing the equator. Meanwhile, heat wave conditions have also been affecting China, Texas, and Mexico, recently with all-time high records being broken in each of these places. And I have talked about China has been suffering, really suffering. So after that, I'm going to just quickly go to Ben C's quick tweet on species breaking. And this was today, July 4th, breaking species suffer hottest single day on the planet ever measured by humans as abrupt climate change combines with habitat destruction, pollution, overkilling of species, and pesticides to compound the fastest extinction rates in history. And so the planet you think you're living on no longer exists. And there you go. There you go. I hear fireworks outside. I thought they were over. I guess they're never over on 4th of July. They started last week. So there you go. He's showing that. And he had a thread that was 60% chance of this year's El Nino, which will be strong. It will be really strong when threatening to do catastrophic damage to the Amazon rainforest, which is now extremely vulnerable due to the extinction economy and its U.S. and U.K. meat and mining corporations. There you go. The plethora of things that we are doing to fuck up the planet. So he just goes on and he highlights articles from The Guardian and from Manga Bay, which is an excellent publication. Manga Bay, he's talking about Cargill, the biggest privately owned U.S. company, wants to be part of the solution. It needs to be. And the corporate system, he says, don't be ridiculous. This corporate system often offers nothing but industrial scale destruction. And he's talking about U.S. Investments in Brazil's beef sector. They're driving the destruction of the Amazon rainforest. Happy 4th of July, folks. Yeah, we could act. So he has many, many, many things on this thread. And I hope you find it. And then here's a new guy I found. And I'm going to end with Nate Bear. And I'm you can't see it on this, but I'm following him. And U.S. Weather Agency warns of deadly heat in the U.S. And that was this week. He wrote this on the 1st of July, and I can't believe that this summer's just flying by. It's just flying by. A large swath of the U.S. South just experienced temperatures that were hot and humid enough to kill a healthy person in the shade, while a large swath of the Northeast U.S. choked under some of the worst air quality in the world. Yes, I was one of them, and I'm sure that many of you were. And no, I don't. Oh, my God. You guys can be so silly out there. All right. Anyway. And this is only the beginning. Texas was suffocating under a record-breaking heat dome. The worst heat and humidity struck Arkansas, Louisiana, Mississippi, and Tennessee yesterday. Friday, where wet bulb globe temperatures soared. See, he said the difference. The wet bulb globe temperatures soared above 90. A 2022 study found that a pure wet bulb temperature over 87 or 31C is extremely dangerous to the human body, even if you're sitting in the shade, not moving, and drinking water. At these temperatures, your body struggles to cool because the surrounding air is so wet that your sweat, it just can't evaporate. At around 95 or 35C, no amount of shade, lack of movement, or hydration can save you. Your body simply can't lower its temperature. Heat stroke sets in. Your organs begin to cook, and death is inevitable. While a wet bulb globe temperature of 94 is just shy of the 87 Fahrenheit pure wet bulb that the 2022 study said could be lethal. Fire and heat. With dangerous humid heat in the U.S. South, Texas has been hit with drier record-breaking heat of up to 117 degrees Fahrenheit, 7.2 C. The signs were here earlier this year when Texas hit 104 in late February, the earliest 104 in the history of the United States. At the same time, cities in Canada and the U.S. Northeast have choked under some of the worst air quality in the world as record-breaking wildfires in Canada smother massive areas of North America. By early June, normally the start of wildfire season, wildfires had already burnt more boreal forest in Canada than any other year on record. These fires have released 160 million tons of carbon dioxide, almost the same amount as all of Canada's carbon emissions in 2021. Get that? You could hardly imagine bigger climate disasters than these, but we have to, because without radical action to transform economies and end fossil fuel burning, these events, they won't be the outliers. They will become the norm. The world is currently 1.2 C hotter than it was during the pre-industrial age, with most of this increase having come in the last 50 years. At a global average temperature increase of 2C, which we can expect within 20 years, 1 billion people will experience deadly wet bulb temperatures for more than 10 days a year. It's not like they could jump on a plane and take off. No. And on current trends, this wildfire season in Canada will be nothing exceptional. There's a lot more forest left to burn, many hundreds of millions of acres. And with temperatures continuing to rise, these forests will burn. The U.S. is the world's second largest emitter of greenhouse gas and by far the world's largest historical polluter. Canada is currently the world's highest per capita emitter, meaning the average Canadian is responsible for more greenhouse gas emissions than the average person in any other country on Earth. Oh my God. While the focus in recent weeks has been on North America, in general, the climate crisis hits countries in the global south the hardest. These are countries with the least historical responsibility for the crisis, and in many cases with a much reduced ability to adapt. In India, for example, where extreme heat has killed hundreds of people in recent weeks, only around 25% of air conditioners are in households, right? Ignored warnings. This is why it is absolutely incumbent upon rich countries who have benefited so much from burning fossil fuels to cut their emissions deeper and faster than the global south and provide finance for countries to adapt. And that was what COP27 was about, helping the countries to adapt, us rich countries. India needs more air conditioning, and it needs the power for this air conditioning to come from cleaner energy so that we don't end up in a vicious feedback of more extreme heat, more air conditioning, more fossil fuel burning to power the AC. Governments have ignored 50 years of warnings from scientists and failed to stand up to the fossil fuel industry. So, still today, the US and Canada, well, what are we doing? We're expanding the fossil fuel, expanding it. Just kicking that can down the road. One of my favorite ones. Still today, the US and Canada are expanding it. As a result, we now live in a state of climate crisis. And there is no way to avoid things getting worse in the short to medium term. The heat and fire is here. We have to adapt. We have to help others to adapt. But adaptation can take us only so far. We need to demand that our governments stand up to the fossil fuel industry and other industries driving the crisis. Industrial agriculture, the meat industry, the timber industry. Because we cannot adapt to extinction. Nope, we can't. We can't adapt to extinction. So at that, guys, at that, I'm done. Kept it an hour and 7 minutes. And let me see what you guys are saying. It's great to see all of you. For plants. When does that stop? Oh, you know what? Part 2. You'll have to come back. I'm not prepared. But that's a great question. And really, thank you. Thank you for joining. Thank you so much. Thank you. Lightning rod, I live in an ocean of fresh water. I'm getting ready for the world to descend on this location. Yeah, well, they already are descending on my location because the greedy realtors are selling 5-acre plots to these clueless morons that are lighting the fireworks out that I hear out there. Yep. So, Kai, you don't like eating beef. Cows are actually lovely. They don't deserve to be raised for slaughter. Yes, I agree. Driftless Hermit. Hi, hon. Wetbulb temps are reached all the time. In the back of semi-trailers if you're loading or unloading. Hog confinements in 100 different ways. There's just so much sometimes that makes me just feel like I can't breathe. I can't breathe. It's overwhelming. But we are here. What are you saying, Veg? You had a comment. Underground houses built into a hillside stay cool in summer and a lot warmer in winter. Yeah, but are we going to dig underground where all the fracking is and where all that shit's flowing through? I don't know. I sound like such a pessimist, right? But it's very hard. It's really hard to see all these, all the positives when all the shit's going on. Lindsay says she's lucky where she lives, but she's lived in other countries that don't have any laws in place for protection. Often the excuse is, it's the South. People look at dogs as workers, not pets. That's kind of sad. All right, guys. Well, thank you for coming. I really enjoyed doing the show for you. I really enjoyed the wet bulb temperature discussion, because I realized in conversations that there are a lot of people that really don't know what these terms are. And it's our job to help. When I come across people that need to understand, I'm going to do a show on it. Why not? Why not? All right. Well, I want to say thank you. And we will see you on Friday night. Totally love you guys. Totally. And don't forget, if you can, like and subscribe and buy us a coffee. Most likely like and subscribe. Yeah, that's a good one. Like and subscribe, buy us a coffee.